Hello everybody, good morning. Thanks for coming to the Wheeler Centre. My name's Paulie Stewart. I'm with the fantastic Paul Cox, one of our great film directors. Must admit, I'm a little nervous. I'm more at home and probably on stage at the Esplanade than I'm at the Wheeler Centre, so feel free to throw something at me or get up and abuse me. I'll feel a lot more at home, okay? That'll be good. But we'd like to start off. We'll acknowledge the traditional owners of this area of Melbourne, members of the Kulin Nation, on whose land we gather. I also think it's a good opportunity here at the Wheeler Centre to acknowledge the myth that's out there that there was no resistance or any kind of opposition to white settlers coming to Australia, because we're a block from where they hung two of the first resistance fighters in Melbourne, 7 years after Melbourne was established. So let's remember those crew as well. I'm sure Paul would want me to acknowledge and send our love and genuine support and honour and everything we've got inside us to the family of the unknown Australian who donated their organ, that gave us the chance to both be here. Very important to acknowledge that person. And can we have a round of applause for that person, please? And I would urge anybody, considering it, please consider, getting on the donors list, because organs are needed, and we were both lucky to get one. But I'm very aware that if we'd been born, in outback Australia, or I spent a lot of time up in East Timor, if we'd been born up there, we probably wouldn't be alive. We wouldn't have access to the fantastic health system we've got here in Australia. And we'd also like to acknowledge here today fantastic members of the Austin Hospital staff who kept us alive. And many of those staff appear in Paul's film, and I believe Bob Jones is being inundated with offers to be in other movies and stuff.
It's off to Hollywood with Bob.
He's off to Hollywood. The Bachelor 3, I heard. But anyway, I'm here today, obviously, with the great Paul Cox, who is one of our most iconic filmmakers in this country. He's made 20 feature films. Or was this 19, the latest?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It does matter. No, it doesn't matter. And millions of, short films, and a great photographer and a great thinker. And I like him because he's a shit stirrer like me. I saw him the other day and he said most movies are crap. He'd never go and see them at all. And I went, wow, he's pretty honest. Good on him. And it's an honour to share the stage with him, and we're here today basically to talk about our experiences. We've both had liver transplants, and in Paul's case, he's recently released a feature film that goes through a lot of those experiences through his liver journey. And there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask about that film. First off, Paul, is when you were diagnosed with something wrong with your liver, did you have any idea of the journey or the process that you'd have to go through to get a new one?
No, never given some thought. I'd never been ill. I was always very busy, and suddenly I couldn't get out of bed. And then when there was actually no hope for a transplant at all. So. But even when they finally put me on the list, I still thought it was a very strange thing. And the closer it got to the actual transplant, which was 7.5, 8 months, by then I totally lost it. I didn't think it would ever happen, because I had cancer of the liver. That doesn't help. No. Because it usually goes somewhere else, which it did. And also I have not a very popular blood group. So there's very few people. I went to one of these courses they give, or whatever it is, meeting, and I asked somebody, how long have you been on the list? And this woman said about 2.5 years, so it's nice. And what is your blood group? And that was the same as mine. So I didn't think I had any hope at all. I
must admit, in my case, I had no idea whatsoever. And someone said, "Oh, you need a liver transplant," and my band had a show booked at the Esplanade, and I just said, "I'll put it back 3 weeks, and I'll." And someone will just arrive with a little bag, pull it out, whack it in, up I'll go on stage, no problems. No. Like, I hadn't heard about the register. You've got to get on the list before anything happens, and that was a sort of, as in your film, that's quite a task itself, just making the list, isn't it?
Oh yes, you have to be of sound mind, and in our cases that was very difficult.
Yeah. And no alcohol or drugs in the system. So you got there, that was good. You got there, and I've got some family members down the front here. Everyone was very elated in my family when I finally made it to the list, which was fantastic. But in your film, I found it really confronting because there's hospital staff in the film, so I know a lot of the people in the film, but just some of the process you highlight in the film, like the encapsulopathedia. How do you say that word? Come on, you can say that.
Don't ask me.
Basically, you get the toxins from your liver and they go to your brain, and so you have horrible hallucinations. So I had some shocking ones, and you did too, obviously.
Yes, I had my famous journey to Venice.
Yeah.
And I stayed in Venice for 3 days, and this one particular doctor came to see me every day, and he said, "You're not in Venice." And I used to say, "Well, if I'm in Venice, you're in Venice too. Don't give me that rubbish." But after 3 days, they got me out of Venice.
Yeah.
But I didn't stop, and I remember everything. I remember the cobblestones, and I came back 200 years later. 200 years later, 1473, I was there first.
Wow.
And then
it's another movie.
16, I met Vivaldi. I saw him going home.
Yeah.
No, it's true. It sounds all very insane, but it was very insane. But I couldn't get away from it. It was so dense.
And all-encompassing. I had an hour-long conversation with Rupert Murdoch at my letterbox.
That was a bad choice.
I worked at News Limited for many years, and the only encounter I ever actually had with Rupert Murdoch was he followed me into the building one time, and he went up to the security guy and said, "Tell me I don't employ that guy, will you?" And he said, "Yeah, that's Paulie." And so I was at my letterbox for an hour going, "Yeah, I work for you, Rupert. It's great. I've had a great time." And totally all in my head. And then I thought my family sent me to Chicago to get rid of me. I don't know why Chicago. Got no idea, but that was really confrontation. You know, the mind, the things you go through, and another myth. You know, people say you got a bad liver, drink lots of water. I wasn't allowed to drink lots of water at all. I was really cut down on the amount of water I was allowed to drink. Did that happen to you too? And
I can't really remember.
And the salt, no salt.
No. But then later on you discover you should never have had any sugar.
No, or coffee. Yeah.
Stop all that. No, coffee is actually an anti-cancer ingredient.
Okay.
You can have 3 cups of coffee and it stops you from getting cancer. It's true.
I've heard that one before, you know. But
and marijuana is very good.
It is very good, and I love that little example of that stuff you showed me the other day. That was good. But
anybody wants a few drops? I've got them in my pocket.
I guarantee them too. We're going to show a film Paul made, because remarkably, not only did Paul get a new liver, but he fell in love at the same time with the beautiful Rosie here.
No, it happened later.
It happened later.
It's very confusing.
Okay. You tell us, talk us through it then. Come on. You took us through love. I don't know love. You talk us through it, Paul.
You don't know love.
No.
You should certainly know more about it than I do. But it happened after, in the post-transplant meetings. I met Rosie. She sat across the room, and I waved at her a few times, but she didn't take any notice. But slowly we got to know one another, and after all these years, it's the first time when I actually have a relationship. I could never keep relationships because I was too busy. And then I suddenly had to slow down so I could give it some thought. And we've been together for 500 years now. It's amazing. But in the film, there's a totally different matter, and he didn't meet her afterwards. When he's losing his... Has anybody here seen the film? It's running again for a week at the Nova. I think it starts today, and let's see how it goes, because it's very important that this film is successful, so to speak. It's not a greatly commercial film, but it certainly would intrigue you if you're interested. And also, it is appalling how in Australia, if you don't kill a few people on the screen, or you have a few people being raped or violated in body and spirit, you don't get distribution, because we must satisfy the lower instincts, not the minds in film. And that, of course, is shocking. We've done our own, through Cinema Plus, we've done our own distribution, which has been very exhausting but wonderful. And then it's only if there's enough people going that we might get a release for this film. And I think it is a very important film for the very reasons that when you see it, you realize it. It's not only a film that will entertain you, it's quite funny in spots and also quite tragic, of course. But it doesn't do you any harm, you'll feel more. I always say I make films for fellow dreamers, not for bums on seats.
I admire your balls for going to people who put money into films and saying it's got no murders, it's got no car chases, this is about my liver transplant. How did you go getting money up for that?
Well, you have to believe in the supernatural. Because I was in India, in some resort. I was on a jury in the south of India, and the owner of the resort came to see us, and within 10 minutes he'd given me $500,000. Right. Not in cash, but it came. I didn't think it would ever come to that. I thought he was joking, but it really did. Then I went to have, because of the chemo, my hair fell out. It's coming back, look at it. And my teeth also fell out, which was a good thing, because I went to see a dentist and he pulled a few more out. And then at the end of our first meeting, he promised me $100,000. So either something happened in me that I managed to smooth talk anybody into this, or I suspect there were other forces at work. This film had to be made, and because it's the first film, according to the doctors I speak to, that doesn't kill anybody. It's not a thriller. You're not going to see somebody being murdered and then they whip his liver or whatever out of him. There's nobody being given an injection and then waking up without a few kidneys. And so on and so on. So it's a very realistic story about what really happens. Except apart from the hallucinations, which are very different for everybody.
Sure.
But you can follow my trip through Venice a little bit.
Yeah. One thing that was a real feature of the movie for me is the character in the film had a really loving support team, to get through the whole process. I wouldn't have got through the whole thing if it wasn't for my family, my two sisters, my mum, who used to drive from Mentone to Newport with bowls of soup and sit there all day talking to me. And I think it'd be almost impossible to go through it if you didn't have some kind of support network, because you just can't function. So did you have that in real life yourself?
I had a lot of friends that came, yes. A lot of very good friends came, and quite a few of them have actually died meanwhile. They all thought I was going to die. And I'm still here, which sometimes I feel a little guilty.
Yeah. It's funny when people say, "Oh, never thought I'd see you again," and you go, "No, bad luck. Here I am." Yeah, but Paul, you sort of alluded to then. Like I now actually think about my liver transplant as one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it did change my life. And I used to drink too much, and I don't anymore. And obviously, I spent a lot of time at the Austin waiting, 18 months. So there was a lot of time for reflection and thinking about things. One of the things that did hit me out at the Austin is most of the people out there weren't out there suffering from the effects of ice or heroin at all. It was, everyone was out there suffering from alcohol and tobacco, the legal drugs. And you go to sleep at night in the emphysema ward with people spitting their guts out, or wanting a drink or sneaking drinks in, and at the same time the television's on in there and it's the Foster's Melbourne Cup, and so it all seemed a bit, false to me. But did you spend a lot of time in the hospital itself?
I went in a few times, also once a few months before the actual transplant. I had extraordinary strange pains in my legs. I couldn't walk, and they suddenly blew up. And that was very, very painful, and there was nothing they could do. So whipped me up to the hospital, and I screamed for a few days because there was nothing to be done until they found out what it was. I thought I was going then, that didn't look. So I can well do without all the frustration and time and pain that came with it. On the other hand, it does give you the time to reflect about your life and where you're going and what we're all doing here. Also to be in an environment of such kindness. I thought the people at the Austin were absolutely unbelievably beautiful. They loved you, they were kind to you, they were giving. You were in a situation of giving. You're not giving, they were given to you only. And outside of that, you live in a world where people are taking constantly. It's not a give and take exchange now, it's a taking world. Everybody takes from one another. Suddenly you're out of this. And that made life much quieter, more interesting. And giving is always more satisfying than taking anyway, on so many levels. But the actual experience just turns you into maybe a better person. And so I've made a few jokes about this, because I thought most politicians should be forced to have at least a liver transplant before
or
they...
brain transplant.
Well, there's no brain to transplant. But that would really help. It would make a better country, I think. People would be a little bit more thoughtful about what they do and how they should care for one another.
I've got to say also, endorse that. The nurses and the staff of the Austin were fantastic. And at one stage when I was really worked up with all that toxic stuff in my head, I was trying to bring in a campaign that for a year AFL footballers get paid nurses' wages, and nurses get paid and they should have a Brownlow for nurses, and they're the real stars of the community, because I would have seen hundreds in my 18 months in there, and to a man and woman they were fantastic. And I could be a real shit some days. I was really upset, and they just go, "Calm down, mate," and they'd talk you through it. And we are so blessed to have this was all in public that I went through, same with you, and you couldn't complain at all. Exemplary, when we are so blessed to live in a country where we get access to that kind of stuff.
If this had happened to us in America, we would both be dead. And that's a fact.
Yeah. But another thing that obviously, having a transplant's led to with you is a lot of creative, things have come out of it, ideas. And one of the first people I met in the liver clinic was this old lady, and I was sitting next to her, and she said, "Oh, what do you do, Paulie?" And I said, "Oh, I've worked at papers and I write, songs for bands." And she said, "Oh, you should of a day, write something down, you know, and it'll help you sort of work through it. And I went, oh, okay. So I was very lucky. My sister Annie here used to come over, and I'd just tell her stories, and we'd have something to do every day, and it really got me through it. And she said, I think Annie or my mum said, who was that woman who told you that? And I said, I know, her name's Inga Glendinning. And yeah. And she's this legendary writer, her story, and, you know. And she was one of the first people to get a liver transplant. And she didn't sort of say, I'm Inga Glendinning. She said, just try a bit of writing, it'll help. So, you know, that certainly, you know, came out of it. And also, like, the amount of musicians we met out at the Austin, we decided to do something creative about it. So can you sing, by the way?
Me?
Yeah. It's never stopped me being in a band.
Not out of my mouth.
What about dancing?
No,
Traditional Dutch
dancing.
clogging? You can't do some clogging? Because the Transplants, the band, are looking for new members. You qualify? If you could get up there?
Unfortunately, you would have to do it without me because I'm not very good in public.
But yeah, we've certainly gone on to form the Transplants, and who made up of people that we met at the Austin who have all had liver or kidney transplants. And on Donut Life Day every year, we do a gig. And first year we had Darren Hinch get up, who you met last night, and someone said, "Oh, Darren Hinch, can he sing?" I said, "Does it matter? It's Darren Hinch." So he got up and he murdered "You Are So Beautiful." That was good. And then the second year we did it, we got Judith Durham from The Seekers. She was a very close friend of Mundaboy from Yothi Indi, and he died needing a new organ, so she came and got up and did a song with us, which is, you know, I never thought I'd be doing a song with a woman from The Seekers, but anyhow. And then we finally met Bobby Riddell. Have you ever heard of Bobby Riddell, a rocker from the 50s?
Remember the name.
Yeah, because he had a liver transplant as well, so he came and sort of endorsed the transplants and stuff like that. I've got an interesting piece of film trivia for you. You wouldn't have seen the movie Grease ever, would you? Have you seen Grease?
No.
Okay. No, it's just that Bobby Riddell in the school, the school in Greece is called Riddell High, and I said to him, you know, how many times have you seen the film with the schools? And he said, I've never seen it. I couldn't believe that, but there you go. But Paul, also while I was in hospital, I had an experience where I met a little nun in there who was deceased from East Timor, and I've got a big connection with East Timor. My brother was one of the journalists killed up at Ballabo, and the priest had come and he'd said, see you later, and then I woke up and sitting at the end of my bed was this little nun, and you know, I said to her, where are you from, sister? Because it took me 10 minutes to realise she was dark-skinned, and she said, East Timor. And I said, you know, is this Funniest Home Videos? Are you having a lend of me here or something? And she said, no, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, my brother was one of the Ballabo Five, and I play in a band here in Melbourne. And she said, not the Dilly All-Stars? I said, yep. And she said, I've heard of you guys. You came up near my village and brought some food up there. What are you here for? And I said, sister, I need a new liver, you know. And she said, I'll get you one. And I thought you'd been on your medical marijuana. I said, I'll tell you. Because I went, what? And she said, yeah, I'll get you one. Now, a lot of people reckon, Paulie, you're full of shit. That was just a coincidence. It wasn't a miracle. But you weren't. They went in that bed dying and met a nun who said, I'll get you a liver. Because after waiting 18 months and crying myself to sleep most nights, next day, this liver arrived. And but this nun had said to me, but if I get you this liver, you've got to help the women and kids in Timor. And I went, yeah, sure, whatever, sister. Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So she delivered it. So I've actually just come back recently from working with this group of little nuns in Timor where we've gone up and met. And I love these nuns up there. Paul, you'd love them because they're punks. They don't listen to men. They go, nah, we do it this way. They're not interested in fashion, crap. They just help the disabled kids, wonderful women, and another blessing that's come through this whole liver journey. And you came up with the idea to make it after the whole experience or while you were going through it? Did you think, this could be...
No, I wrote a book, Tales from the Cancer Ward, as I was in hospital. And I never thought I would survive it. then just 2 days before Christmas, my family came from Europe and we had our last supper together, which was quite a dramatic thing, but at the same time we had to laugh a lot because it's the only thing left in the end, that you have to laugh at yourself. And 22 minutes to 12, the phone rings.
Is that at night or lunchtime?
At night time.
Yeah.
I was just having a bit of pudding. And they called me to the hospital. That was an enormous, because firstly, I think I had a week to live or something. I had very little time. And my whole system was closing down. And to have my family there, they were all, you know, waiting for me to go. So they had booked fortnight, and we thought it would just be enough time to go to the funeral and see the whole thing through. And at the same time, David Bradbury, I always call him Blackberry, he was making this documentary on the whole thing. And he missed out on his big climax because I didn't die. You know?
Good.
So we bounced back, and here we are. It's still quite amazing at times.
Yeah.
Because there was absolutely no possibility that I would survive.
Yeah. And Christmas Day, of all days. That's,
and
did you have to rush in from somewhere? Were you just in South Melbourne at the time, or were you in the country, like in the film, the actors in the bush?
No, I was in having dinner in Brighton with friends. Yeah. But
I mean, I also found remarkable, like, obviously you wake up after that operation and they get you up on your feet pretty quickly. In my case, they did. Were you up and walking around after that operation? Or?
Well, I think it was pretty heavy, the whole operation. It took quite a long time, more than 12 hours or something. And I remember when I woke up, when I came out of Venice, a few times, and the first thing I see is this lens pointing at me, and I thought, oh. And then, you know, I made a joke of it in the film about how do you feel? Everybody asks you how you feel, and you think, well, please go away. How do you feel? And there is David Bradbury with his camera, and with the lens right in my face, and he says, how do you feel? And you can't speak very well after the tragedy. You just managed to make a few sounds, and I very quietly said, get fucked. And he cut it out of the documentary, which is a great pity. I think the ABC paid for it and they wouldn't have it in it. But it was exactly correct, because it was ridiculous to come and, how do you feel? Wow.
Yeah. Well, I actually can remember the day that I had my liver transplant now. It was August the 16th, and how I remember that is because it's the anniversary of Elvis's death. And my friend is an Elvis impersonator, and he was on the way to a big ceremony at the Melbourne Cemetery dressed as Elvis, and he was in a stretched limo, and he was going past the Austin, and someone rang in and said, oh, Paulie's just got his new liver. So he stopped. Now, every major hospital in Australia should employ an Elvis impersonator, because he walked through those doors at the Austin there, and there were people in wheelchairs standing and walking towards him. Little old ladies were crying. It took him an hour to get up 3 floors from people wanting to touch Elvis and just be blessed by Elvis. But anyhow, so I went in, had the 12-hour op, and opened my eyes, and there's Elvis, and I'm going, where's Bob Marley? Behind you, like, you know. But that was an experience, to find Elvis at the end of my bed when I woke up. But I couldn't believe how straight away they had me on my feet within about 20 minutes, and my appetite came back. I couldn't eat at all. In the lead up to your op, And in the film, the actors eat quite a bit. I actually couldn't eat. You didn't have that sort of problem, or?
Off and on, yeah. But I had a very tough time.
Yeah.
That was, it was really traveling backwards and every day try to feed yourself. And it was, 7 months of that. And every time the phone rings, you have a few heart attacks because you think, this might be it. But it didn't come. And when I met this woman who had been on the list for 2.5 years, and then I thought, well, that's it now.
Yeah. And just the intricacies of the operation, I still don't know. I couldn't, it's just beyond my sort of imagination. But once again, woke up and look, they had me on my feet and they sent me home a couple of days later, which is a fantastic job by the Austin staff. And ever since we've had the transplants, they're there and we can go there any time and they're still loving. They don't push us away. They still encourage us. There's members here today. So, grateful to all the Austin crew. So I think we've got some time for some question and answers if anyone would like to ask some questions and get some answers. Annie Stewart, yeah.
I'm his sister.
I deny everything she's going to say. Okay.
No, I only want to make a comment
about
what it was like for us when Paulie went under the knife. In the story by Inga Glendinning, there was a character and we were waiting for a liver and we called it Big Louie all the time. But it was funny, in 2003 when I went to Timor for the first time, Paul tried to trade me for 2 buffaloes. He said, you can have my sister 2 buffaloes. But the funniest thing, when we were in the Austin hospital and he'd come through, Elvis, his partner Donna, then our mum went in, and finally when I walked in, he said to one of the male nurses, here's the sister I said you could have. And you don't know how much that was sort of vaguely sort of reassuring. Oh, Paulie's back. That's all.
Thanks, Annie. Down the front here, yep.
Paul, I'm just wondering now that you're at this point with Force of... Sorry, I'll just repeat that, Paul. Now that you're at this fantastic point with Force of Destiny and all the work you've done leading up to that, have you allowed your mind to go, what next?
Yes, indeed. I never thought I would bother about making another film because it's too much hassle, and also at this point to get the money together is not easy. But then I saw something really brutal and terrible, and I won't go into details. I've done it a few times, where you suddenly realize Force of Destiny is about single individual sick and dying and finding love, in a way. Suddenly I realized I should make a film about the world, a society that is sick and dying, with a similar sort of result, to find love. Because we're living in a time where, as if the actual conscience of the world is being sucked out of it all. There's so many people that actually run the world that are psychopaths and that have no conscience. The way these armies operating in the East, I have to elaborate a little bit because it was about seeing kids being shot in the back because they're throwing stones at a few of those ISIS fighters, and they were just mowed down by the soldiers, and one mother screamed with a dead child in her arms, "Please kill me, please kill me, I cannot live." And when I saw that, it had after this transplant and all the things we went through and the other operations I had, and I'm very grateful to be alive and to still be able to work and think and feel and struggle and do my thing. But when I saw that, I lost everything about the human race. I thought animals would never do it to anyone. This is a disgusting thing. So in 2 or 3 days' time, I wrote a script that is basically about I've never killed anybody on the big screen. I've always avoided that, leave it up to Quentin Tarantino and his mates. I don't need to add to all that crap, and why should we make films that violate our bodies and spirits? We can aim at a much higher thing, which I try to do in Force of Destiny anyway. But in this case, I think to actually shake the whole thing properly, I have to make one more film, and there will be people being killed, and I would touch upon things like that, which are so gruesome. You just wonder, how is it possible that we can behave so badly on this earth? It was too much, and in 2 or 3 days' time I wrote this whole script, and now I'm just perfecting it, but I don't know if I can get the money anywhere. So if anybody has some spare cash, just please let me know. But we'll see if it has to happen like Force of Destiny. This will happen too.
It will. I have no doubt it will. Your hands. Good luck.
Thank you.
My name's Mari, and it's been fantastic to come to listen to both of you and your art and your health, your illness, your wellness. I find it really interesting, because I'm also doing some research myself, that would you be allowed to talk about these things, say 10 years ago, you know, on stage? I just want to think about that in terms of, it's not just because you're artists that you're able to talk about illness, but it's really interesting. Is it something that's happening over time that we are now accepting to listen to people's stories or medical stories?
Well, if it had happened 20 years ago, we would be dead, you know. This is one of the extraordinary things, that we live in a world that is this brilliant, phenomenal invention of taking organs from a dead person and give life to another. To receive that gift of life is extraordinary thing, and the gift is just too much. Actually, you can't wrap your head around it. But we would be dead if it had happened 20, 25 years ago. In fact, all the first transplantees, they always died because they didn't realize it was the DNA that had to be evened out. But I think if a society, if a civilization can do such a spectacular thing like keeping people alive, and you know, Bob Jones, the wonderful surgeon that saved our lives with his team. Yes. No, he wouldn't turn up here. He's busy doing a few transplants. What was I saying?
There just wasn't there wasn't the technology, I suppose, to...
That we are capable of doing something so spectacular. I mean, as I said, you can't really wrap your head around it. It's too big. It's huge. And at the same time, we can experience something so horrible like this thing I just told you about. And it happens as we speak, and most horrendous things are happening. I come from a war zone, and I was born 3 weeks before the war started. And my mother told me when I was a little boy that she took me to the window of the house where I was born, and in front of the house was a park with a bridge and a pond and trees and grass and people. And the first battle had taken place there, and she said there were people lying in the pond, and there were people lying in the grass, and there were dead people on the bridge. And she said, although you were only 3 weeks old, I covered your head, your face with my hand, because I was too terrified that something might register. She told me this much later. My whole life I have been rearranging the bodies in the park. My whole life I've had trouble with this. Also, to come from a thing when the first 5 years of my life I saw nothing but death and destruction. The smell of death was always with us. People were rotting under the ruins. The city was more or less destroyed, and every time we came home there was no house left except our house. It kept standing. It was remarkable that we actually survived. Just before the war was over, we had to flee and run along a road, and I remember before we fell into a ditch to look around, and some shrapnel was skidding along the road and cut a tall woman behind me, cut her head off. And also that, you know, nobody talked about these things for many, many years. When I was 30 or something, I went to the Bangladesh war because I could not believe that this at all had really happened. I'd seen it myself. And that we're capable of all these beautiful things. That's another thing about transplantation, that we can actually save somebody's life. We can give life. My God, what an extraordinary thing. At the same time, we can do most horrific things. And it doesn't stop, because what I went through as a child, look at the people, the thousands of people that are entering Europe at the moment. What is going to happen? They have no more home, nothing. And there's 3 different bodies that are fighting them, throwing bombs. Now we're contributing, throwing a few more bombs on top of it all. It's absolute nonsense. How is this possible that we haven't got enough sense in our heads? So that's why I suggested to give all the politicians a very happy transplant, because it would help. Now it is this shocking awareness that what we are at hasn't really changed, and I find that very disturbing. That's why I would love to make a film. It would really be quite a brutal film, but in the end there would be a great a sense of light and freedom would come at the end. But you have to travel through that darkness, I think, and I've always avoided that.
Thanks. Paul Stewart. Yeah. Look, I was a regular attender at the Painters and Dockers gigs through the 80s there, and I'm wondering now whether there's any plan to sort of have some extra gigs from the Painters and Dockers, and also whether you've actually written any songs about your experience that you might be able to talk about.
I'm working on a new one called Like My First Liver, You're Dead to Me Now, but that hasn't proceeded any further. But yeah, we're going to be doing some gigs, the Dockers, over summer, and that's another great thing of being alive. I can remember being at the Austin going, I'd really love to do one more Painters and Dockers gig. You know, if I could do anything, it'd be one more gig. And I was lucky to get the transplant, and then the Age inducted us into their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So we did this great gig for them, and we're no old blokes, so we just take our time. And we've just done the first show in Sydney we've done for 20 years, which was a sellout, which was great. And we're going to Brisbane, Perth and Hobart soon, so, and a couple of gigs in Melbourne. So yeah, look, I've just said to everyone in the band, just stay alive, you know, and we can't go wrong. It's something, you know, like Paul, you stay alive, every year your status grows, it's fantastic, you know, so just stay alive, that's half the battle. But yep, we'll be docking for sure. Thanks for your interest. Well, just obviously, Annie and our brother Tony was one of the journalists killed up at Ballabo 40 years ago this October, and a guy here in Melbourne, Gil Santos, and myself formed a band called the Dilly All Stars, and we now go and we've been spreading the word about East Timorese independence. You know, for the last 40 years, we've done gigs at, you know, in. I'm a former altar boy, by the way, and we toured Portugal for the Communist Party, Paul. You'd be very happy to hear that. And we went to Sao Paulo, to the Sao Paulo Film Festival, where Balabo, the film made by your friend Robert Connolly, was voted by the public as most popular film, which is pretty ridiculous, given that there were 500 films there, and the Brazilians just really got the Balabo story. And so yeah, we formed the band, the Dilly All Stars, and they've been part of my journey. And it was after I got my liver transplant that Robert Connolly came to me and he said, "Oh, we're going to make a movie about your brother." And I said, "Good luck. A lot of people have tried," but to Robert's great credit, he ended up making it. And Gil and I were employed as the sound consultants on the movie. So we went up to Timor when they were making the movie, and that's when I met this other group of nuns. And I met 5 nuns, and they had 1 motor scooter. So they had 5 little nuns on. They try to squeeze on, but they look after disabled kids. So it's hard to get a kid with spina bifida on it. So we said, look, let's get them a van. So we came back to Australia and we put out a call for the van, and we raised all this money, and someone said, "We can't give it to you, Paulie, because you're going to go to Brazil." And I said, "No, I won't. I won't nick off with all the money." But anyhow, I had to go through the Jesuits because they set up an account for me, and then I heard there was a gig going at the Jesuits in Melbourne. So I'm now back here working at Jesuit Social Services at the Artful Dodger Studio in Collingwood. So it's all tied up. It's all connected with the liver, Paul. It's all part of the journey. It's all part of the trip, mate. And yep, the Dilly All Stars are up and happening, Annie. And we just got back from Timor. We went up there and we did a show for the nuns. We took Richard here, our friend, and we did a couple of shows for around Timor, and it was fantastic. Yeah, and I didn't think I'd do. I'm sure you didn't think you'd make another film. I never thought I'd be up touring again. So I'm eternally grateful, and I don't know about you, Paul, but I feel a real sense of obligation of giving back. Because I got this great gift, and like I said, I love these little nuns because they're just hands-on. No bullshit, no money spent on bar tabs or clothes or anything, money straight from them to the kids, so I love them. So I've gone from punk rock chicks to nuns. Yeah, not much difference. Yeah.
Yeah, great to see you both. Paul, I haven't seen you since you used to live in Punt Road. I was in one of your movies in St Kilda Junction 48 years ago.
Goodness me.
And Paulie, I'm Peter, as in Timor-Leste Alma Nuns, and we used to record in the same studio, and you promoted our band, and we're very good friends of Lobby Lloyd's. So I thought I couldn't resist coming and saying hello to you two, because I mightn't get another chance to do that, all right?
Good on you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Down the front here.
I saw you on the ABC last week, I think it was, with the Flybees, the African boys that you introduced to Australia, and how do they fit into this whole story?
Well, I started working with the Jesuits in Melbourne, and I met these 2 former child soldiers from Africa, and I walked past them, and I said, "Who are you 2 guys?" And they said, "Oh, we're rappers, and, can you get us some shows?" And I went, "Oh, okay, let's see how we go." And they've proved to be the most fantastic, school workshop act you've ever seen in your life. We've now done 67 schools around Australia, and these 2 boys, I just love working with them, Paul. They've made me fall in love with being an Australian again, because they walk in and say, like, "Hi, you kids here complain about the brightness on your phones. We got meat on Christmas Day, so snap out of it, And these kids go, "Oh." And then Fabrice goes, "I was 8 when Mum and Dad was killed. I was 11 when I was made a child soldier." The other boy says, "Mum escaped from the refugee camp with her cousin. Her cousin raped her. I'm the product of that. Hi, everybody, how you going?" And they tell their lives, and these privileged kids in Australia get to go, "Wow, I haven't got it so bad in this country." And but they're also fantastic entertainers and rappers, and it's coming up to the 40th anniversary of Tony's death in Timor, and there's a few events on that are pretty sombre kind of things, and I wanted to do something that was uplifting because my mum loved to dance and sing and act the fool, and she was a teacher who was always, they couldn't keep her out of the school productions. They'd say, "You're the teacher, you can't keep going," and she'd be always up there. My sister gets the showmanship from her. I'm the quiet one in the family, and so we took these rappers up there, and it was fantastic because the first show we did was supposed to be, Paul, at a club for 40 white aid workers, and it was going to be $80 each, and they were going to fly in hip-hop dancers from Jakarta, and we went, no, that's not us. So we moved it outside, and we invited 6 local bands to come and play, and the local AIDS group turned up and said, "Oh, can we get up and do a message?" And we said, no, you do the whole stage, you do all the messages, and we'll just supply the music. And they went, "Great." So then Timor Television came and filmed the event, and 4,000 people turned up. But it just meant that everywhere we went after that, these 2 African boys who 5 years ago owned the shorts they worked in were getting swamped by the population of Timor, who just thought they were Jay-Z and Kanye West. It was... The worst thing though, Paul, was I was with these 2 gorgeous young African guys going, "Yeah, I'm one of the guys," and they're going, "Out of the way, old man." You know, like, "You, hip-hopper, get out of the way," you know. Paul, just stay alive, mate, just stay alive. But yeah, that's how the African, and they went down a treat there, and one of the first shows they did there, I'll have to give you this film, is Timor's just made its first film featuring its first female superhero, Feta Fantastica, and she flies around the country going, "Hey, stop fighting, a bit more loving, come on," and she's fantastic, so I'll show you that, you'll like her, she's a ripper. Yeah.
Hi, and congratulations to both of you for a successful transplant and for speaking to us. You both look really well. Paul, I was wondering how long ago you actually had your transplant. Paulie was about 5 years, I think.
Well, I was already 104. No, I was already 69 when I got mine. And that is actually 4 years too old. I was already well, and my due date was gone. So I was extremely lucky.
And how long ago was that? How long has it been?
20 years ago. No, it's 5 years ago.
Oh. And I was just wondering if either of you, being so close to death, have had any insight into the afterlife or become more spiritual since your transplants, or become religious?
It automatically you become a little bit more... I don't like the God of man, because that's not a God. We have fabricated this God ourselves. And because of that, we have created an enormous disharmony in the world. It's ridiculous that you have. Anyway, we won't go into that, but I think the God of man has created an awful lot of chaos in the world. So, but you do get, there's always in hospital, you get strange visits from little nuns, probably friends of yours, that come and, tell you about what Jesus is up to and all that. You become quite allergic to that one. I'm more and more inclined to turn away from anything that smells of any particular religion. But I'm a much better lover. Not literally, but I'm much better at living and appreciating life and really caring about people. And in that respect also, I see everything, even like quite a few times I've been told I was going to die. That's happened 3 times to me. And that also changes you tremendously, because suddenly you realize how incredibly precious life is, and you wish only you could share that with other people. Because people just get on with it, and it doesn't. That's why I said before, when at the end, when you see Force of Destiny, At the end, there's a lot of rain on the windows from the hospital. I remember that so well. It's raining all the time, and you can hear the rain slowly inside, and it's quite beautiful when you see the dandenongs through the top of the window. But that very idea was representing all the tears and that great grief of man and stuff. That was a terrible sort of strong symbol of everything. And I don't know, the experience in the hospital and the way I automatically turned from any organized religion, because I had a very religious upbringing, which didn't bother me much later, but even more so now, I would not have anything to do with it. But I'm much more spiritual and much more giving, and I have much more patience. And also, when we made that film, and I have much less fear, I'm not afraid of anything. When you have stood on the edge of the void so many times, and you are indeed thankful that you are alive. You know, what are we complaining about? You know, this is an incredible thing. So I feel extremely, there's no word for this, but I feel above all that human endeavor. And also, I've learned to understand and face death much better. I think I'll be better at dying now too, as I'm better at living.
Thank you.
In my case, there's a line from a Nick Cave song that used to come back to me all the time. And he said, he goes, the great abyss, it's only knee deep. You know, so even though I was right on the edge there, you know, yeah. But as Paul said, you know, certainly got a sense of, you know, wanting to give back and giving and the power of, I suppose it was, you know, the example of the person who gave me their organ so I could live. You think, you know, giving, when you give, you actually get back so much more than you put in. And I've learnt that, particularly working with these young African guys, that, you know, they keep thanking me for giving them stuff, and I keep thanking them for making me fall in love with my country again, because, you know, this is a fantastic place. They love Q&A, these guys. They go, wow, you can call an Australian politician a dickhead to their face and they don't kill your family in the night. How great is that? And you go, well, that's pretty good, you know, seriously, folks, that's pretty good. We get the right to do that in this country. Or, you know, a glass of clean water and a clean toilet, you know. We're laughing in this country. And so I've certainly got a great sense of gratitude, and I've learned giving back. And when I do these workshops at the schools, I say, guys, if you get a chance to work with refugees or asylum seekers, take it, because you'll be surprised what you get back from these people, and it'll be a lot more than you put in. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's time. Thanks for having Paul and I, and yeah.